Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency alarm went off. The loud noise filled his small office on the UES Liberty. He put down his cup and looked at the red light flashing on his desk. This was not how he wanted to start his day. "Captain Morrison to the bridge," came the voice through the speakers. "We have an urgent message from Earth Command." Jake stood up and walked quickly through the metal hallways of his ship. The Liberty was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was his ship. He had been captain for 3 years now. Most days were quiet. Today felt different. When he reached the bridge, Lieutenant Susan Hayes was waiting for him. Her face looked worried. She held a data pad in her hands. "What is it, Susan?" Jake asked. "Sir, we got a message from Admiral Clark on Earth. It came through the emergency channel." Susan handed him the data pad. "It's about the Zephyrians." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Zephyrians were aliens who looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and large eyes. They had been friends with humans for 5 years now. The peace treaty between their species was very important. Both sides needed each other for trade and protection. Jake read the message on the screen. His eyes got wide as he read each word. "Captain Morrison, you are ordered to go to the Zephyrian homeworld right away. Queen Veltara has demanded to speak with a human representative about a serious problem. She says there has been an insult to the royal family. The Queen is very angry. Do not make this worse. The future of our alliance may depend on this meeting. Good luck, Admiral Clark." "An insult to the royal family?" Jake said out loud. He looked at Susan. "What kind of insult?" "The message doesn't say, sir. But if Queen Veltara is calling for an emergency meeting, it must be bad." Jake knew about Queen Veltara. She was the ruler of the Zephyrian Empire. She had millions of people under her rule. She was smart, fair, but also very proud. If someone had insulted her family, she would not forget it easily. "How long to reach their home world?" Jake asked. 3 days at maximum speed, sir. Set course immediately, and send a message back to Earth Command. Tell them we are on our way." Susan nodded and walked to her station. Soon, Jake could feel the ship changing direction. The stars outside the window started to move as the Liberty turned towards Zephyrian space. Jake went back to his office and sat down. He tried to think about what could have gone wrong. Humans and Zephyrians had been getting along well. There were trade ships going back and forth between their worlds. Some humans even lived on Zephyrian planets to help with technology. He remembered the cultural exchange program from 6 months ago. A group of human engineers had gone to the Zephyrian homeworld to help upgrade their power systems. Maybe something had happened then, but all the reports had been good. No problems were mentioned. Jake called up the files on his computer. He looked at the list of humans who had visited Zephyrian space in the last year. There were not many names. Most of them were diplomats, traders, or engineers. All of them had good records. His door chimed. "Come in," Jake said. Susan walked in and sat down across from his desk. "Sir, I've been thinking about this situation." "And?" Queen Veltara mentioned an insult to the royal family. The Zephyrians take family honor very seriously. If someone said or did something wrong to her granddaughter or another family member, she would see it as an attack on her entire bloodline. Jake nodded. He knew Susan was right. The Zephyrians had different ideas about respect and honor than humans did. Something that seemed small to a human might be very big to them. "Do we know anything about the royal family members?" Jake asked. "Queen Veltara has one granddaughter, Princess Kira L. She's young, maybe equivalent to a human teenager, very curious about other worlds and cultures." Jake thought about this. A young princess who liked to learn about other cultures. If someone had insulted her, it would explain why the queen was so angry. "Susan, I want you to pull up all the reports from humans who might have met the princess. Start with the cultural exchange program." "Yes, sir." Over the next 2 days, Jake and Susan read through dozens of reports. Most of them were boring technical documents about power systems and machinery, but a few mentioned meeting members of the royal court. One report caught Jake's attention. It was written by Sergeant Danny Miller, an engineer from Texas. He had spent 2 weeks on the Zephyrian homeworld working on the palace power grid. His report mentioned meeting a very smart young Zephyrian who asked lots of questions about Earth. Jake read the report again. Danny Miller seemed like a good soldier. His record was clean, but there was something about the way he wrote. He used casual language even in official reports. Jake wondered what Danny was like in person. "Susan, do we have contact information for Sergeant Miller?" "I'll find it, sir." As they got closer to the Zephyrian homeworld, Jake felt more worried. Through the window, he could see their destination getting bigger. The Zephyrian homeworld was a beautiful planet with blue oceans and white clouds. On the surface were huge crystal cities that sparkled in the sunlight. Jake had been there before, but it always amazed him. The Zephyrians built their cities to look like works of art. Every building was designed to be beautiful as well as useful. "Sir, we're being contacted by Zephyrian traffic control," Susan reported from the bridge. Jake walked to the bridge and listened to the message. The Zephyrian voice was polite but serious. "Human ship Liberty, you are cleared for landing at the Royal Spaceport. Queen Veltara is waiting for your arrival. Please land immediately." "Thank you, traffic control. We are coming in now." As the Liberty landed, Jake looked out at the crystal towers of the royal city. Somewhere in those buildings, an angry queen was waiting for answers. Jake just hoped he would be able to give her the right ones. He straightened his uniform and checked his appearance in the mirror. Whatever had happened, he would face it honestly. The future of human-Zephyrian relations might depend on the next few hours. "Ready, Susan?" "Ready, sir." Jake took a deep breath and headed for the exit. It was time to find out what had gone so terribly wrong. Jake and Susan walked through the crystal hallways of the Zephyrian royal palace. The walls were made of some kind of clear blue material that seemed to glow from inside. Their footsteps echoed as they followed their Zephyrian guide. The guide was tall and thin like all Zephyrians. His blue skin had darker blue patterns on it that showed his rank in the palace. He had not spoken since meeting them at the landing pad. His large eyes looked straight ahead as he walked. "The queen is very upset," the guide finally said. His voice was quiet and careful. "Please be respectful when you speak to her." Jake nodded. "We understand. We want to fix whatever problem there is." The guide stopped at two huge doors covered in silver patterns. He pressed his hand against a panel on the wall. The doors opened slowly with a soft humming sound. "Queen Veltara will see you now." Jake and Susan walked into the throne room. It was the biggest room Jake had ever seen. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. Tall windows let in bright sunlight that made everything sparkle. At the far end of the room was a throne made of white crystal. Queen Veltara sat on the throne. She was beautiful in the way that all Zephyrians were beautiful. But there was something regal about her that made Jake feel small. Her blue skin was lighter than most Zephyrians, and she wore a flowing white dress with silver details. On her head was a crown made of crystal that caught the light. But what Jake noticed most was her expression. Her large eyes were narrow with anger. Her mouth was set in a hard line. This was not going to be a pleasant conversation. "Humans," Queen Veltara said. Her voice filled the big room easily. The translation device on Jake's belt turned her words into English. "You have come to answer for the insult to my family." Jake and Susan walked closer to the throne. They stopped about 10 feet away and bowed as they had been taught in diplomatic training. "Your Majesty," Jake said. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Liberty. This is Lieutenant Susan Hayes. We have come to address whatever problem has occurred. However, we do not know what insult you are referring to." Queen Veltara's eyes flashed. She stood up from her throne and walked down the steps toward them. Even though she was tall and thin, she moved with power and grace. "You do not know?" she said. Her voice was getting louder. "One of your people has taught my granddaughter to use offensive language. For weeks now, Princess Kirahel has been calling members of my court by a human word that your translation system tells me is very rude." Jake felt confused. "What word, Your Majesty?" "Bastard," Queen Veltara said the word carefully. "She calls the court advisors bastard. She calls the guards bastard. She even called her tutor bastard yesterday during a lesson about mathematics." Jake's eyes went wide. He could not believe what he was hearing. How had a Zephyrian princess learned that word? "Your Majesty, I can assure you that no human would intentionally teach inappropriate language to a member of your family." "Intentionally or not, it has happened," the Queen snapped. "My granddaughter claims she learned this word from the funny human, who was here several months ago. She says he was her friend and that this is how friends talk to each other." Susan stepped forward. "Your Majesty, if you could tell us more about this human, we might be able to identify who it was and determine what happened." Queen Veltara began to pace back and forth in front of her throne. "The princess says he worked on the power systems in the palace. He had dark hair and spoke with a strange accent. He wore the uniform of your military but was not an officer." Jake and Susan looked at each other. That description matched Sergeant Danny Miller perfectly. He told her stories about Earth, the Queen continued. She became very attached to him during his time here. When he left, she cried for days. And now she speaks like him. She uses this word constantly, thinking it is normal human behavior. Jake realized how serious this was. In Zephyrian culture, the royal family was sacred. For a princess to use what they thought was profanity in public was a huge embarrassment. It made the royal family look bad and could damage their authority. Your Majesty, Jake said carefully, we believe we know which human you are talking about. We will investigate this matter completely and provide you with answers. Answers are not enough, Queen Veltara said. She stopped pacing and stared directly at Jake. This is a test of your people's respect for our culture. If you cannot control your own people and prevent them from corrupting our youth, how can we trust you as allies? Jake felt his heart sink. This was worse than he had thought. The Queen was not just angry about the language. She was questioning the entire relationship between their species. I want to know, the Queen continued. Was this deliberate? Did your people send this human to undermine the respect my granddaughter should have for royal protocol? Is this part of some plan to make our young people more like humans and less like Zephyrians? No, Your Majesty, Jake said quickly. We would never do such a thing. Our cultural exchange programs are meant to build understanding between our peoples, not to change your culture. Then explain to me how my granddaughter learned to speak like a human soldier. Explain to me why she thinks it is appropriate to call respected members of my court by offensive names. Susan spoke up. Your Majesty, human language can be very confusing. Words that seem rude might be used differently in casual conversation. It's possible there was a misunderstanding about the appropriate use of this word. Queen Veltara turned her angry gaze to Susan. Are you suggesting that my granddaughter is too stupid to understand when she is being taught inappropriate language? Not at all, Your Majesty. I'm suggesting that human casual language might not translate well to Zephyrian formal settings. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. She walked back to her throne and sat down. When she spoke again, her voice was cold and formal. You have one day to bring me the human who did this. I want to hear from his own mouth why he thought it was appropriate to teach a princess of the Zephyrian Empire to speak like a common soldier. If his explanation is not satisfactory, I will have to reconsider our alliance. Jake felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The peace between humans and Zephyrians had taken years to build. Trade between their worlds was worth billions of credits. Military cooperation helped protect both species from other threats in the galaxy. All of that could be destroyed because of one misunderstood word. We will find him, Your Majesty, and we will bring him here to explain what happened. You will, Queen Veltara agreed. Because if you do not, my people will assume that humans have no respect for Zephyrian culture. They will assume that you see us as beings you can influence and change according to your wishes. That assumption will end our friendship. Jake bowed again. We understand, Your Majesty. We will return tomorrow with answers. The Queen waved her hand, dismissing them. Jake and Susan turned and walked back through the big throne room. Their footsteps seemed very loud in the silence. When they reached the doors, Jake could hear Queen Veltara's voice behind them, though she was speaking to someone else now in the Zephyrian language. He could not understand the words, but the tone was still angry. Outside the throne room, their guide was waiting for them. The Queen has arranged quarters for you in the palace, he said, but I suggest you work quickly. Her Majesty is known for her patience in most matters. This is not one of those matters. As they walked through the crystal hallways toward their rooms, Susan spoke quietly to Jake. Sir, we need to find Sergeant Miller right away, and we need to understand exactly what happened between him and the princess. Jake nodded. He was already thinking about how to contact Miller and get him to the Zephyrian homeworld quickly, but he was also worried about what they would find when they talked to him. Had Danny Miller deliberately taught inappropriate language to a young alien princess? Or was this all just a terrible misunderstanding that could destroy everything humans and Zephyrians had built together? Tomorrow they would find out. Jake sat at the small desk in his palace guest room, staring at his communication device. It had taken 3 hours to track down Sergeant Danny Miller's current location. He was stationed at Mining Facility 7, a remote outpost on the edge of human space. Liberty to Mining Facility 7. Jake spoke into the device. This is Captain Morrison requesting immediate contact with Sergeant Danny Miller. Static filled the room for several seconds before a rough voice answered. This is Facility 7. Hold on, Captain. I'll get Miller for you. Jake waited, drumming his fingers on the desk. Through his window, he could see the Zephyrian city stretching out below. The crystal buildings caught the light of the setting sun and threw rainbow patterns across the sky. It was beautiful, but Jake could not enjoy it. He had less than 20 hours to solve this crisis. "This is Sergeant Miller, sir." The voice that came through the speaker had a thick Texas accent. "What can I do for you, Captain?" "Sergeant Miller, I need you to listen carefully. Do you remember your assignment to the Zephyrian homeworld 6 months ago?" There was a pause. "Yes, sir. I worked on the power grid at the Royal Palace." "Good assignment, sir. Interesting people. Did you have any contact with members of the royal family while you were there?" Another pause, longer this time. "Well, sir, I met the young princess a few times. Sweet kid. Real curious about Earth and human technology. Why do you ask?" Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Sergeant, I'm on the Zephyrian homeworld right now. Queen Veltara says her granddaughter has been using inappropriate human language. She claims she learned it from you." The silence that followed stretched for almost a minute. When Miller finally spoke, his voice was much quieter. "Oh no. Oh no, no, no. What kind of language, sir?" "She's been calling court officials bastards, Sergeant. The Queen is extremely upset. She thinks you deliberately taught the princess to be disrespectful." Jake heard what sounded like Miller dropping something heavy. There was some muffled cursing in the background. Then Miller's voice came back, sounding panicked. "Captain, I swear to you, I never meant to teach her anything bad. She was just so interested in everything. She asked me thousands of questions about Earth and humans and how we talk and what we do. I thought I was being friendly. Sergeant, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. The future of our alliance with the Zephyrians may depend on it." Jake could hear Miller taking deep breaths. When he spoke again, he sounded more controlled but still worried. "Sir, the princess used to visit the worksite sometimes. Her grandmother let her watch us because she was interested in technology. She would ask me about the tools, about how human machines worked, about life on Earth. And she was so smart, sir. Picked up everything real quick. She wanted to know about human culture, so I told her stories about growing up in Texas, about my job, about my friends back home." Jake was starting to understand. "What kind of stories, Sergeant?" "Just normal stuff, sir. Like how me and my buddies would work on cars together, or how we'd fix things around the farm. I told her about the time we had to repair an old tractor that kept breaking down. I called it a stubborn bastard because it wouldn't start." Jake closed his eyes. He could see how this had happened. "I told her about my workshop back home," Miller continued. "How I'd talk to my tools when they didn't work right. You know, like calling a wrench a stupid bastard when it slipped. Or calling a difficult engine a tricky bastard when it wouldn't run." "Sergeant Miller," Jake said slowly, "did you explain to the princess that this was casual language? Did you tell her it might not be appropriate in formal situations?" "Sir, she's an alien princess. I figured she knew about formal and informal better than I did. Besides, she seemed to understand everything else about human culture real quick." Jake rubbed his forehead. This was exactly the kind of cultural misunderstanding that could destroy relationships between species. "Tell me more about your interactions with Princess Kira L." Miller's voice got warmer as he talked about the princess. "She was amazing, sir. So curious and friendly. She'd bring me food sometimes when I was working late. Local stuff that tasted pretty good. And she'd sit and listen to my stories for hours." "What kind of relationship did you develop with her?" "I guess I thought of her like a little sister, sir. She reminded me of my niece back home. Always asking questions, always wanting to learn new things. Real sweet kid." Jake could hear the genuine affection in Miller's voice. It was clear that the sergeant had not meant any harm. "Sir," Miller continued, "I need to ask you something. Is the princess in trouble because of this? Because if she is, I'll do whatever it takes to fix it." "The princess is not in trouble, but the Queen is very angry. She wants you here to explain what happened." "I'll leave right away, sir." "How fast can I get there?" Jake checked the star charts on his datapad. "If you leave immediately on the fastest transport available, you can be here in 18 hours. I'll be there in 16, sir. I'll find a way." "Sergeant, before you go, I need to understand something. When you used the word bastard around the princess, how did she respond?" Miller thought for a moment. "She laughed, sir. She thought it was funny how I talked to inanimate objects like they were people. She started copying me sometimes, calling difficult problems tricky bastards or calling stubborn equipment stupid bastards. I thought she was just playing around." Jake was beginning to see the full picture. Princess Kirahel had learned to use bastard the way Miller used it, as a casual term for things and people that were being difficult. But she had started using it with court officials, probably thinking it was a friendly way to address people who were giving her problems. Sergeant Miller, when you get here, you'll need to explain all of this to Queen Veltara. She needs to understand that you are not trying to be disrespectful. I understand, sir. Captain, I feel terrible about this. I really liked the princess and I never wanted to cause problems for her or her family. I believe you, Sergeant. Just get here as fast as you can. Jake ended the communication and sat back in his chair. He had a better understanding of what had happened, but he was not sure it would be enough to satisfy Queen Veltara. Susan knocked on his door and came in. She had been trying to learn more about Zephyrian royal protocol. Any luck with Miller? She asked. Yes and no, Jake said. He explained what he had learned. Susan listened carefully. So it was an innocent misunderstanding? Completely innocent. Miller thought he was being friendly and sharing human culture. The princess thought she was learning how humans express friendship and deal with difficult situations. Will that be enough for the queen? Jake looked out the window at the Crystal City. I don't know. Queen Veltara is very concerned about royal dignity and proper protocol. Even if Miller's intentions were good, the result is that her granddaughter has been using what the Zephyrians consider profanity in formal court settings. What's our next move? We wait for Miller to arrive, and then we hope we can convince the Queen that this was all a cultural misunderstanding. Susan sat down in the chair across from Jake's desk. Sir, I've been thinking about this situation. Maybe we're approaching it wrong. What do you mean? We're treating this like a diplomatic crisis, but maybe it's really a family issue. Queen Veltara is not just angry as a ruler. She's angry as a grandmother who thinks someone has been a bad influence on her granddaughter. Jake considered this. You think we should approach her as a family member rather than as a head of state? Maybe both. But if we can show her that Miller genuinely cares about Princess Kirahel, that might help her understand that he never meant any harm. Jake nodded. It was worth trying. But first, they needed Miller to arrive safely and quickly. Outside his window, the sun was setting behind the crystal towers. Tomorrow would determine the future of human-Zephyrian relations. Jake could only hope that friendship and understanding would be stronger than pride and misunderstanding. In 16 hours, they would find out. Sergeant Danny Miller arrived exactly 16 hours after Jake's call, just as he had promised. Jake met him at the landing pad as Miller stepped off a small transport ship. The sergeant looked tired from the long journey, but his face was set with determination. Miller was a stocky man in his 30s with dark hair and calloused hands that showed years of mechanical work. His uniform was clean but well-worn. When he saw Jake, he straightened up and saluted. Sergeant Miller reporting, sir. I came as fast as I could. At ease, Sergeant. Thank you for getting here so quickly. Jake looked at Miller's worried face. Are you ready for this? Queen Veltara is still very angry. Yes, sir. I've been thinking about what to say during the whole trip. I just hope she'll listen to me. Susan joined them as they walked toward the palace. Sergeant Miller, we need to prepare you for Zephyrian court protocol. There are specific ways to address the Queen and... Ma'am, with respect, Miller interrupted. I've been to the palace before. I know how to be polite. The problem isn't that I don't know their customs. The problem is that I taught a sweet kid some bad words by accident. Jake was impressed by Miller's straightforward approach. Maybe honesty would work better than diplomacy in this situation. They entered the palace and walked through the crystal hallways toward the throne room. Miller looked around with recognition. I remember this place, he said quietly. Princess Kirahel used to walk with me through these halls sometimes. She'd point out all the artwork and tell me stories about Zephyrian history. When they reached the throne room doors, their guide appeared. He looked at Miller with curiosity. The Queen is waiting, the guide said. But there has been a change. Princess Kirahel has requested to attend this meeting. Jake felt surprised. The princess wants to be here? She insists on it. She says this matter concerns her and she should be allowed to speak. Miller's face lit up. She wants to help? We'll find out, Jake said. The doors opened and they entered the great throne room. Queen Veltara sat on her crystal throne looking as regal and angry as before. But next to the throne, in a smaller chair, sat a young Zephyrian. Princess Kirahel looked like a teenage version of her grandmother. She had the same blue skin and large eyes, but her face was rounder and more curious. She wore a simple blue dress instead of formal robes. When she saw Miller, her eyes went wide and she smiled. Danny, she called out, then caught herself and sat back down properly. Queen Veltara's expression became even more stern. As you can see, the human has already had an inappropriate influence on my granddaughter's behavior. Jake, Susan, and Miller walked forward and bowed as before. Miller kept his eyes on Princess Kira-El, and she kept looking at him with obvious happiness. Your Majesty, Jake began, we have brought Sergeant Miller to explain what happened during his time here. I can see that, the Queen said coldly. Before we hear from him, however, my granddaughter has something she wishes to say. Princess Kira-El stood up from her chair. She looked nervous but determined. Grandmother, I asked to be here because this is my fault, not Danny's fault. Kira-El, the Queen said sharply, you will refer to the human by his proper title and rank. But grandmother, that's not what friends do. Danny taught me that friends use each other's names. Queen Veltara's eyes flashed with anger. And what else did this human teach you about how friends behave? Princess Kira-El looked confused by her grandmother's angry tone. He taught me that friends help each other. He taught me that friends share stories and food. He taught me that friends talk to each other honestly, even when things are difficult. Miller stepped forward. Your Majesty, may I speak? You may. Miller looked directly at the Queen, but his voice was gentle. Your Majesty, I want to start by saying I'm sorry. I never meant to cause problems for you or for Princess Kira-El. I think there's been a big misunderstanding about the way I talk. Explain this misunderstanding. Miller glanced at the princess, who was watching him hopefully. When I was working here, the princess was very interested in human culture. She asked me lots of questions about life on Earth. I told her stories about my work and my friends back home, including teaching her inappropriate language. Ma'am, I need to explain how I use that word. When I called something a bastard, I wasn't being mean to it. It was more like talking to a friend who's giving me trouble. Queen Veltara looked confused. I do not understand. Miller thought for a moment, then walked over to one of the decorative panels on the wall. He pressed it gently and nothing happened. See? If this was my workshop back home and this panel wasn't working right, I might say, come on, you stubborn bastard. Work for me. I'm not being mean to the panel. I'm talking to it like it's a friend who's being difficult. Princess Kira-El nodded enthusiastically. Yes, like when the power converter wouldn't start and Danny said, "What's wrong with you, you tricky bastard?" But then he fixed it very carefully. He wasn't angry at it. He was just talking to it. Queen Veltara stared at her granddaughter. You mean to tell me that when you call your tutor a bastard, you think you're being friendly? Yes, grandmother. When my math tutor gives me a very hard problem, I say, you tricky bastard, like Danny taught me. I thought I was being friendly like humans are. Miller spoke up again. Your Majesty, where I come from, calling someone a bastard can be mean, but it can also be friendly, depending on how you say it and who you're talking to. I call my best friends bastards all the time. It's like a nickname. But you use this word around a princess of the royal family. Ma'am, to me, she wasn't a princess first. She was a friend first. A really smart, curious, funny friend who reminded me of my little niece back home. Princess Kira-El looked at her grandmother.
Danny always treated me like I was just Kira-El, not Princess Kira-El.
He didn't act scared of me or worried about saying the wrong thing. He just talked to me like I was a normal person. Queen Veltara was quiet for a long moment. She looked back and forth between Miller and her granddaughter. You're telling me, she said slowly, that my granddaughter has been calling court officials by a friendly nickname? An inappropriate friendly nickname, Miller said. I should have explained better when it's okay to use casual language and when it's not. Grandmother, Princess Kira-El said, I didn't know it was wrong. When my tutor is being difficult, I thought calling him a bastard was like saying, silly friend who is giving me trouble. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. Susan stepped forward. Your Majesty, if I may, this seems to be a perfect example of how the same words can mean very different things in different cultures. Queen Veltara stood up from her throne and walked down the steps. She stopped in front of Miller and studied his face carefully. Sergeant Miller, do you care about my granddaughter? Yes, ma'am, I do. She's a wonderful kid, smart as a whip and curious about everything. Any grandfather would be proud to have a granddaughter like her. And you never intended to teach her to be disrespectful? Never, Your Majesty. I would never want to cause problems for her. She's got a bright future ahead of her, and I wouldn't want to mess that up. The Queen turned to her granddaughter. Kira-El, Do you understand now that this word might not be appropriate to use with your tutors and court officials? Yes, grandmother. I understand that Zephyrian formal language is different from human casual language. Queen Veltara was quiet for several minutes. The throne room was completely silent except for the sound of breathing. Finally, she spoke. It seems I owe you an apology, Sergeant Miller. I assumed you were deliberately trying to undermine Zephyrian culture. Instead, you were simply sharing your own culture with a curious young person. Miller looked relieved. Thank you, Your Majesty. I'm just glad we could clear this up. However, the Queen continued, we still have a problem. My granddaughter has been using inappropriate language in formal settings. This has caused confusion and embarrassment in the court. Princess Kirael spoke up. Grandmother, I can fix this. I can apologize to everyone I called a bastard. I can explain that I was trying to be friendly, but I used the wrong words. Queen Veltara smiled for the first time since Jake had met her. That would be very mature of you, Kirael. Miller cleared his throat. Your Majesty, if it would help, I could teach the princess some better human words for expressing friendship. Words that would be more appropriate in formal situations. That would be acceptable, the Queen said. Then she looked at Jake. Captain Morrison, it seems this crisis was based on misunderstanding rather than malice. Yes, Your Majesty. I hope this means our alliance remains strong. Queen Veltara nodded. Indeed it does. In fact, this incident has taught me something important about the differences between our cultures. Perhaps we need better cultural education for both our peoples. Princess Kirael bounced excitedly. Danny, does this mean you can visit again? I have so many more questions about Earth. Miller grinned. If your grandmother allows it, I'd love to come back and answer more of your questions. But next time, I'll be more careful about the words I teach you. Queen Veltara looked at her granddaughter's happy face and Miller's genuine smile. I think that would be very educational for both of you. 3 hours later, Jake sat in the palace gardens with Queen Veltara, watching Princess Kirael and Sergeant Miller sit together on a bench near a fountain. Miller was carefully explaining different human words while the princess listened with complete attention. You see, Kirael, Miller was saying, when you want to say someone is being difficult in a formal setting, you could say challenging instead. Like this math problem is challenging instead of this math problem is a tricky bastard. Princess Kirael nodded seriously. So challenging is the formal word and bastard is the casual word? Exactly. And bastard is really only for close friends or when you're alone. Never in front of important people or in official situations. I understand now. Human language has different levels, just like Zephyrian language does. Queen Veltara smiled as she watched them. Your Sergeant Miller is a good teacher, she said to Jake. He's a good man, Your Majesty. Not the most polished diplomat, but he has a good heart. Sometimes a good heart is more important than perfect manners. The Queen paused. I owe you an apology as well, Captain Morrison. I was quick to assume the worst about human intentions. Jake shook his head. No apology needed, Your Majesty. You were protecting your granddaughter and your culture. That's what any good leader would do. They sat quietly for a few minutes, listening to Miller and Princess Kirael continue their language lesson. Danny, the princess said. What should I say when I want to tell someone they're my friend? In formal situations, I mean. Well, you could say I value our friendship or I consider you a good friend. Those are polite ways to express friendship. And in casual situations? Miller grinned. In casual situations, you could say you're a good buddy or you're all right or just I like you. But not you're a good bastard. Not in public, no. That one's just between very close friends when nobody else is around. Princess Kirael looked thoughtful. Human friendship sounds very complicated. It can be, but it's worth it. Good friends make life better even when the words are confusing. Queen Veltara stood up from her chair. Captain Morrison, I would like to propose something. Of course, Your Majesty. I would like to establish a formal cultural education exchange between our peoples. Not just technical cooperation, but real cultural learning. I think today has shown us that our peoples can be friends, but we need to understand each other better. Jake felt excited by this idea. That sounds excellent, Your Majesty. What did you have in mind? I would like Sergeant Miller to return here regularly as a cultural consultant. He can teach selected Zephyrians about human customs and language. In return, I will send some of our cultural experts to human worlds to teach your people about Zephyrian traditions. That's a wonderful idea. I'm sure Earth Command would approve. Queen Velterra walked toward Miller and her granddaughter. Jake followed her. Sergeant Miller, the Queen said, I have a proposition for you. Miller stood up quickly and came to attention. Yes, Your Majesty? I would like to offer you a position as our official human cultural advisor. You would spend several weeks each year here, teaching selected Zephyrians about human customs. You would also help us develop better cultural protocols for future exchanges. Miller's face lit up. Your Majesty, I would be honored, but I'm just an engineer. I don't know if I'm qualified to be a cultural advisor. You are qualified because you understand that friendship can bridge cultural differences. That is more valuable than any formal training. Princess Kira jumped up from the bench. Danny, that means you can come visit regularly. I can show you more of our cities and you can tell me more stories about Earth. I'd like that very much, Princess. But I have one condition. Queen Velterra raised an eyebrow. What condition? I want to learn Zephyrian customs properly this time. I don't want to accidentally cause any more problems. The Queen laughed, and Jake realized it was the first time he had heard her laugh. That is very wise, Sergeant Miller. My granddaughter can be your teacher for Zephyrian culture. I would love that, Princess Kirael said. I know all about royal protocol and formal language and proper behavior at court functions. Miller looked a bit nervous. That sounds like a lot to learn. Don't worry, the princess said with a grin. I'll be a good teacher. And if you have trouble remembering something, I'll just say, come on, you forgetful bastard, try again. Queen Velterra, Jake, Susan, and Miller all started laughing. Princess Kirahel looked pleased with herself. But only when we're alone and being casual, she added quickly. That's right, Miller said. You're learning fast. As the afternoon went on, Jake watched the easy friendship between Miller and Princess Kirahel rebuild itself. They told each other stories, shared jokes, and even taught each other songs from their homeworlds. Susan came over to Jake as the sun was setting. Sir, this turned out better than we could have hoped. It did. Sometimes the best diplomacy happens when people just talk to each other honestly. What do you think will happen now? Jake looked at Queen Velterra, who was listening to Miller tell Princess Kirahel about Texas barbecue. I think our alliance just got a lot stronger. When you have real friendship between people, political agreements become much more stable. As evening approached, Queen Velterra called for a formal dinner to celebrate the new cultural exchange program. The dinner was held in a beautiful dining hall with crystal walls that showed the stars coming out over the city. During the meal, Princess Kirahel stood up to make a speech. I want to apologize to everyone at court who I called a bastard, she said clearly. I was trying to be friendly like humans are, but I used the wrong words for the wrong situation. I'm still learning about different cultures, and I made a mistake. She looked at Miller. But I'm not sorry I learned about human friendship. Danny taught me that friendship can happen between anyone, even people from different worlds. He taught me that friends help each other and care about each other, no matter what words they use. She turned to her grandmother. I promise to use proper language in formal situations from now on, but I also hope I can keep learning about other cultures because that's how we become better friends with our allies. Queen Velterra stood up and hugged her granddaughter. That was very well said, Kirael. I'm proud of you for taking responsibility and for wanting to keep learning. Miller wiped his eyes with his napkin. Princess, that was the best speech I ever heard. You're going to be a great leader someday. After dinner, as Jake prepared to return to his ship, Queen Velterra walked with him to the landing pad. Captain Morrison, today could have ended very badly for both our peoples. Instead, it has brought us closer together. I thank you for your patience and wisdom. Thank you, Your Majesty. But the real credit goes to Sergeant Miller and Princess Kirael. They showed us that friendship is stronger than misunderstanding. Indeed, they did. I look forward to many years of better cooperation between our species. As Jake's ship lifted off from the Zephyrian homeworld, he looked down at the crystal cities glowing in the darkness. Through his window, he could see Miller and Princess Kirael standing on a palace balcony, waving goodbye. 3 months later, Jake received a message from Miller, who was on his second cultural exchange visit. The message included a photo of Miller and Princess Kirael working together on a new power system design. They were both smiling, and the princess was wearing a human-style work uniform. The message read, Captain, everything is going great here. The princess is teaching me proper Zephyrian etiquette, and I'm teaching her about human engineering. She's got a real talent for fixing things. Yesterday, when a circuit wouldn't work, she said, "This challenging component requires additional attention." I was so proud. But when we were alone later, she whispered, "That stubborn bastard just needed a friend to understand it." I think she's got the hang of both cultures now. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. It's the best job I ever had. Jake smiled as he filed the message. Sometimes the most important diplomatic breakthroughs happen not in formal negotiations, but in simple moments of friendship between people who were willing to understand each other. The alliance between humans and Zephyrians continued to grow stronger, built on a foundation of mutual respect, cultural exchange, and the understanding that friendship could bridge any gap between worlds.